Hey, thanks for listening to this latest episode of the Business of Fun podcast. It's me, your host, Dave Wakeman. My guest today from Red 13 Creative is Mark Roberge. We had a great conversation, and I'll tell you about that in just a moment. But before I do, let me remind you to check out my website. It's www.davewakeman.com. That's where you'll find my blog, my store, everything. I am working on putting together a new iteration of the Fans for Life workshop. Hopefully I will have that ready for you to see and think about and purchase in the next couple weeks. Hopefully mid-April, so another week or so. Check it out, though. Get the Talking Tickets newsletter at talkingtickets.substack.com, because if you're listening to this thing, the Business of Fun, you're going to love the Talking Tickets newsletter. But if you go to the website, you get everything. The blog contains all. It's got multitudes. But back to Mark Roberge. So Mark is a drummer with a band called Prospect Hill, which I note because we talk about him going on tour in just a few days during the conversation. So check them out. When next time they're around, I'm going to definitely go see them. Mark had a really cool idea and way of framing artist development. And that was what I was really excited to talk to him about, because he's a touring musician, but someone who also is really steeped in the ideas of great marketing. So we got into the myth of the algorithm, and I've got my song on Spotify. We talked about word of mouth marketing, find your core fans and build them into super fans. We talked about the challenges of building audiences, how to launch your band and your album, this idea of the overnight success, and how we turn that into like helping artists think about what the success look like, streams of revenue, how to identify buyers, the ideas that work everywhere, and the idea of retail 101. This was really a good conversation. I think it's going to be very helpful to anybody, no matter where they are in the ecosystem. So check out my conversation with Mark here on The Business of Fun. All right, I want to welcome Mark Roberge, or if you want, Mark Roberge, to The Business of Fun, because we were just joking about you could go like Stephen Colbert or Colbert. So this is great. Mark, man, I am so excited to talk to you. How are you?
Good. I'm very well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so the basis of this conversation today is you are making a push about Make Our Music, and you want to help artists develop themselves and develop fan bases more completely and more comprehensively, and probably, I'm guessing, more systematically. Tell us a little bit about what you do.
So ultimately, I get that question a lot. What do? I do a lot, right? So I've always considered myself, a musician first, songwriter, and then ultimately a drummer, right? That's what's led me to even just being in the music industry. And then from there, I've established an agency that has gone on to, write, produce, with artists, then from there create content, and then work on distribution. Now my main focus here is ensuring that this great product that all these artists that I work with have, great music, great content, is getting out there into the world properly and building a fan base to then, basically help build their careers as independent artists, so that they can be self-sufficient and continue to put music out, tour, create, connections with fans, and be in a position where they don't, I like to tell everybody, no one's coming to save you, right? Be in a position where no one's going to come to save you. So you have the ability to build your own pathway out there.
Yeah. And so I think the core for you is about sustainability. And I agree, right? Like, you can't trust. I think that it was always kind of, and I think the word I'd use is like, it felt for artists predatory, right? With like, it was like labels and everything else were going on, but at least they were providing some marketing support, right? But now I think that it's less likely that you're going to get any support at all, right? Like, even if you have a deal with somebody. But what's the biggest with the people you work with? What's the biggest thing that stands in the way of them thinking about sustainability as part of their job?
Well, I think the biggest thing that gets in the way is first their mindset, right? So like they're artists first and foremost, right? And I am as well. I've just kind of learned all of this out of necessity for survival, right? So I've had to kind of split the brain a little bit, and so ultimately, most of these artists haven't split the brain yet, or they just aren't capable of it, and that's fine, right? And so that's why you hire and bring in teams to help, right? But ultimately, their whole system is, I'm just going to make the music, and then I'm going to put it out there, and then magically something's going to happen, right? They think it's just going to happen, that they're going to be discovered, and then they're all so let down when they put something out, and they, I got it on Spotify, or I got it on Apple Music, and then months go by, and they still got only 15, 20 streams, if not even
Yeah.
100,
Hmm.
and so it's a big, obviously negative element to them of, then they start to mentally go down into a cave
Hmm.
of like, okay, I'm gonna continuously do this, and I'm just gonna give up, right? So that's the saddest thing,
Yeah.
because I've seen
Yeah.
so many great artists just give up because they didn't actually have a system in place to put out that music and market it properly. They're just putting it out and hoping that something will happen.
Yeah, well, I feel it's rooted in this, and this takes place everywhere. It's not just a music or an artist or an entertainment thing. It's this false mindset. If you build it, they will come, and there couldn't be a lesson to teach people about marketing because it's wrong. That's just how it is. You can
Yeah.
have the greatest product or service in the world, and if people don't know it exists, they're not going to just find it. Especially not today, because there is so much noise, and there's it putting your music on or your podcast or on Spotify is no miracle. Right?
Yeah.
It's like that's like not even a hard thing to do at this point. So to expect that that's going to be the thing, like you're going to get into the algorithm and go go go, baby. That's crazy.
Yeah, and I hear it every day, and they're like,
Yeah.
well, I got my song on Spotify, and I say, okay, cool. So does millions of other artists. Like that isn't
Yes.
like it's not an accomplishment. I'm sorry, like I don't want to, and I don't want to demean anybody, but I'm like, guys, that's not an accomplishment. That's just what you need to do now, right? And so that's really not ensuring that anyone's going to hear it, except for you and your friends that you've told. Otherwise, there's no way to drive people to that song on Spotify. Spotify is not going to help you. You got to prove to their algorithm that it's worthy of their push.
Yeah. And so one of the things I'm curious to ask you about is like how you advise people to start building this. My point of view comes out of being a huge fan of bands and the way they've like operated their fan clubs. So people like the Grateful Dead, Pearl Jam, REM are and I think probably even a more universal one. I don't know about her fan club, but the way she manages her fan base is Taylor Swift.
Oh
So
yeah,
like,
big
how
time.
do you get people like started on the path of like thinking about this? Because I know it's like, and tell me if I'm wrong here. Building your career, marketing is everything. And you have to have a holistic point of view. So I'm curious how you go about working with people on these things.
Yeah, so like the first thing is shifting their mindset to like, okay, I don't need millions of streams, I don't need millions of views, I don't need millions of followers, right? I just need to. My first target is 1,000 real fans that actually. I mean, the first target is 100, right? And then from there you continue to build on a bigger scale. But 100 real fans is what I actually want to push to them immediately. Is like 100 that we can actually communicate with directly,
Hmm.
right? 100 of those people that we can text message, we can email, we can DM, that we can get them to take actions. We can, and create engagement. We can create relationships with them, because as an independent artist, that those first, like, 100 to 1,000 are so important, because those are the early adopters, right? Just like with anything else. And
Yeah.
these are the people that are going to feel that they're part of your story and your come up, and they're the ones that are going to feel ownership to what you're building, right? And so they're
Hmm.
the ones that are going to be the biggest advocates for you out there in the world. They're the ones that are going to become your mouthpiece. They're going to become your word of mouth marketing, at the cookout. Hey, listen to this band I just found, or hey, get in my car, check out this band I just heard, put it on my playlist.
Hmm.
Like, those are the people that matter. So you got to focus, and I got to shift their mindset to that is the main objective right now. We got to find those people, and those people, then you got to nurture that relationship, and we got to build them into super fans that are now buying your merch every time you put out a drop. Pre-saving that release, sharing it to all their friends, showing up to the show, buying the merchandise. Those are the people that matter, and those are the people that create that self-sufficient system where once you have 1,000 of them, and we have ways of getting them to spend $100 over the course of a year on you, you're grossing $100,000 as an
Yeah.
independent
Hmm.
artist. You might not be netting that. That's not your, there's obviously a margin built in there, but even at a 30% margin, you're making $30,000 take home from your project that you can continue to put back into it and then expand it. So that's my first thing, is mindset shift. And then from there, it's the systems in place now on a marketing level to start growing that fan base and basically advertising your music all day, every day to potential audience, and then driving them in through a funnel to get them to take the actions that are necessary to turn them into a, someone that just literally we interrupted on social media to then becoming a follower, then someone that subscribes into your fan list, then joins your community, and then from there, multiple funnels to then get them to take the actions that are necessary to continue to grow. You get them in a merch funnel, get them exclusive offers, get them to, based off of where they stream, get them to stream you on there and then follow you on there so that we start triggering algorithms on the streaming side. So now the streaming platforms are now your marketing pieces. So it becomes a whole system in place where it's a machine all day, every day.
Yeah, you again, correct me if I'm wrong here. I think that like too many people think that the algorithm of the streamer is going to push down into their funnel, down onto the merch. It's going to help them create the 1,000 true fans, right? But it's actually the reverse. Like you need those 100 or 1,000 true fans to get any boost from the algorithm.
Yes, you need them. That's what signals to the algorithm whether or not that's that song or that artist has actually got momentum and moving, right? It's showing that you've driven audience from outside sources to their platform, over a concentrated amount of time, especially over the first weekend of a release is great, and that song was streamed, and the ratio of how many people streamed that song to how many took an action, and the first action they're looking for is, did they listen past 30 seconds? Check. Okay, yeah. Now did they take an action on that song? Did they save it to their library? Did they add it to their playlist? Right? And so that's what they're looking for to create an indication of whether or not that song is actually doing well on their platform, and that it's safe for them to now start showing it off to more people, and that's what triggers it. So for instance, we have artists that have I work with Brian Craddock is a good friend of mine. He's the guitar player of a band called Daughtry, right? And so he's a engineer producer. He works with a ton of artists out of Nashville, and he's always like bringing artists to me that he like really cares about, because he's like, he wants to make sure releases go well after they produce them. And so one of the artists that he's working with is Small Town Troy, and he literally he's been dormant in the music industry for like 10 years. He was in like another band, and now he's got his own project, and he brought him to me right away and from release one. And so what we did was, before we actually released this first single, we built an audience leading up to that single that was craving this song, this drop. And so we were able to drive, but ultimately 500 new audience, like brand new people, to his first release over the first weekend. And then boom, we triggered the radio and Discover Weekly algorithm that week of the release. And we've done it multiple times in the same system. But that just shows, like, even a brand new artist that literally had zero fans from day one, we start building them, their anticipation's there. We drive those real fans over that weekend. Boom, algorithm, first release.
Yeah, the way you describe that is like really interesting to me, because one of the things that I try to teach people, either here, not as much on the podcast, but like in person, I teach class, is about product launches, and that's what you're talking about here. And I think that one of the false ideas people have is they just like throw it out there, and instead it's actually like you were talking about, you can build anticipation. Right. You can, it doesn't have to be crazy. It's like just doing one or two things every day. Right. And just like sort of, because consistency really plays a lot into the success of a launch, at least in my experience. And what it does, and this is where my question to you comes in, is like, even if you're a small band or a new artist, if you have, let's say, we'll use something like that I wouldn't even use necessarily right off the top, like a 2-week window.
Yep.
If you do something over 2 weeks, it makes you seem bigger than you might really be, just because you keep showing up. How is that? Am I right in that, when you're launching artists and pushing people that way? And then how do you get people to buy into this idea? Because I think there's still a reluctance, because that's not the way people talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, you're correct, right? It's the same thing as a product launch. Ultimately, music is a product at the end of the day, right? So you're right, 100%. So ultimately, it's like, the more time you have to build, a fan base that's waiting for this next release, obviously that increases the demand for it. You have more people there. That's what's going to ensure that release is going to be bigger, right? I tell everybody, it's like a ladder, right? Make sure that you're going up the ladder in between these releases, and going up that ladder is more audience. We're gaining more fans, more followers, more people into your email and text message list between each of these releases, so that we're ensuring that each of those next releases are going to be bigger and bigger, right? it's only it only makes sense. And so ultimately, like getting an artist to like understand that, because they think that they're going to release it and then market it, right? And
Mhm.
that's there's now it's like we're kind of behind because we don't have anybody
Yeah.
right there to make a big impact. And I try to I use the example of like, you know, you want to make a big splash, because the bigger splash you make, the more of a wave you're going to have on that release. Now, if you're trying to make that, you're trying to market it right off the gate, and you don't, in day one of the release, and you didn't build any anticipation, that splash is going to be so small on that
Yep.
initial day of that release. It's almost non-existent, But if or we have a month to 2 months in regards to building enough fans to
Yep.
for that release, you're going to
Yep.
have a cannonball splash, and now that we're going to be knocking water out of the pool.
Yeah, that's exactly the way I explained. So when I used the example of 14 days, I was like, I would never tell anybody to spend less than 30 days on doing something like this. Ideally, I would say 90, because you gotta like it
Set
needs to
up and
be
everything too.
confined.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other thing, which I think you probably agree with, and I'll be curious here, is what I teach is that 80% of your effort for marketing your launch or your product, whatever, your service, whatever you're doing, happens in the pre-launch and then the day of the launch, like right at the initial launch. And 20%, that like period that you think is where you're marketing, that's like it. Because once the thing is out in the world, you have a really like very little you can do to keep it going.
Yeah.
Does that meet what you see?
Yes, I agree. And there is obviously, the new obviously the understanding of like once something's out and you can still continue to market it, properly through additional content that can be created
Hmm.
after that to then reignite it ultimately. It can happen, but ultimately all the work that happened before that is what's going to end up pushing it, right? So for instance, like there's an artist we worked with, we helped develop, and at a young age built her up, and now she's actually her debut album's coming out independently next month after coming off a major label deal. Next tomorrow, sorry, tomorrow. Her name's Emmeline, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
dates. So tomorrow it drops, and so she is somebody that it seemed like almost like she's been at this for 10 years, and she seemed like an overnight success because she had something go viral on on TikTok years ago, and then ultimately from there it just snowballed, right? So, but everybody was like, "Wow, she came out of nowhere." It's like, no, she was working for 10 years, and she had fan bases built across all those social media platforms, drove those into TikTok, and then she had a foundational base that was there to like ensure that that song that was great and that was good came out and was basically a success on virality wise, and then from
Hmm.
there has now being able to parlay off that. But it all takes time. You have to build fan bases that are there for that release to ensure that it's going to get that big push.
Yeah, it's another one of those things. Along with if you build it, they will come. It's the myth of the overnight success,
Yeah,
and everybody's built. You're constantly building, right? People, even for me, they go, "Oh my God, you like must have like this huge, like always done these things, like almost always been successful, always did all this." And I'm like going, "No, you don't see see the weeks and months when I had like three or four different jobs, and like I was like
yeah.
scrambling, like just trying to get a foot in the door somewhere, get somebody to like trust me. There's no, it takes time. And I think the biggest lesson that I think what it sounds like to me is what you teach people is that you have to be consistent. It has to be something over and over and over. And, it goes back to what you were talking about before with like the mindset and the systems. It's like, know those numbers, right? Like if you make a 30% profit margin, you make $30,000 uh, 1 year. That's the difference between being able to continue and not being able to continue.
Of course,
You
yes.
know, and I think like the $30,000 is not the final success point. The final success point is being able to like be able to not have that second job, right? Like not be able to
Yes.
wait tables while you're like performing, right? Just being able to live off the performing, and then you can grow from there. And it's like stages. But maybe I'm wrong.
No, you're completely right. That's exactly what it is. It's like you need to, there needs to be goals, objectives, systems in place to hit those goals and objectives. And then there needs to be a way that you can, like, basically offboard yourself from everything else you're doing as you slowly get to those goals, right? It's like my first thing is like, all right, so I always ask somebody, like, what's your goal? And they're like, well, my goal is to do this full time. And I go, what does that mean? right? The
Yeah,
first thing is like,
right.
what does that even mean? Right? And they go, well, then I don't have to work anymore. I go, so how much do you have to make in order to do that? And they go, oh, I don't know. I go, well, that's the first thing we need to understand here.
Yeah.
How much do we need to generate, profitability wise off of your music career where you can now be comfortable and say, I'm going to quit my job. This is making me enough. And then also we have to factor in taxes. We have to factor in all this.
Yep.
So what is that, what is the net that we need? And then we have to understand what the gross is, right? So
Yep.
then that's basically a conversation that has to be made. And a lot of them don't even have that number in their head. They just have this roundabout, okay, I just want to be able to live
Yeah.
comfortably off this. Well, what does
Mhm.
that mean? And then when you put actually $1 there, you actually have a goal. And then my whole thing was there was no way, every other industry has this, right? They have an understanding of cost per acquisition for a customer and then lifetime value, right? So
Yep.
every industry has this, except for the music industry, right? So I was like, okay, well, if we set a goal of what we need to make revenue wise, we need to understand how many customers we need to get, or fans, right? Ultimately, how many fans do we need to get? And then how many of those fans do we need to get to spend X amount to generate that number that you have?
Yeah.
And then I figured that out. It was like this mathematical problem. I said, okay, we need a system in place to do this. And that's why I developed FanFlowy with the team and I. And it was basically a way to create a marketing system where we could market out there, gather fans, then nurture those fans into fans where then, we could monetize them, get them to take the actions, become part of your community, build that relationship. And now we could actually identify it costs, 75 cents to acquire that
Yeah.
fan,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
How many of those fans does it take to then get sale number 1? Then how many of those convert to sale number 2? How many convert to sale 3? And then now we could have a mathematical problem. Okay, we put X amount of dollars at the front of this funnel. We know what we're going to get back at X amount of time. And
Yeah.
that's what we did. We built that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and this will be, I'm curious how you teach people this, which is that I think everybody first, no, not understanding the goals, not understanding what success looks like. It's very fuzzy, right? And I think it's because, like you said, people are artists. I find it's even that like people just don't understand it because they've never been taught it. It's not just artists; it's across the board, right?
Of course.
When I do something, I'm like, well, what does success look like? And I really drill into it, like, how much money is it? Like, is it new customers? And then customer acquisition, people, yeah, you got to understand this. And I think this is where my question comes from is like, I think too often people fall into the trap of thinking that all customers, all fans are created equal. And you need to have different levels, like those first 100 or 1,000 fans that you were talking about. Those might be the people that buy everything.
Yes.
But it's okay that if you have 1,000 of those and then you have 50,000 who maybe just come see you play a show. Right. And they're like going, oh, my God, Mark's coming to town. I'm going to go see his band. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
Right. And I think thinking through that is can be a challenge, which brings me to, streams of revenue. Right. When you're thinking about, I need to be comfortable, or I want to do this full time. I don't want to have to, quote unquote work. Because I would say like a touring musician is like the friggin' hardest job going.
It is
almost.
a job. Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
I'm getting ready to go. I'm going out to Europe next month with my band. We're going out, for basically a 3.5 week tour out there. And I'm like, oh, I'm starting to stretch now.
Yeah, it's hard work. But
yeah,
how do you get people into or what do you teach people about streams of revenue and like how to think through these things? Because I think it's very important, right? Because the old model was like you tour to help sell albums, right? This is old school because I'm dating myself a little bit.
Yeah.
And the t-shirt money and the merch money would be like a little bit like a nice to have, and like most people did or didn't have a fan club, but they didn't really systemize it. How do you talk to people about these streams of revenue, because they can make or break you. Like you need more than one or two. You got to have like 5 or 6, and things that maybe were a bad idea now, or like things that were selling out. Screw that, man. You got to take the money.
Yeah, ultimately, the way I look at it is like there's the performance revenue. Inside of that performance revenue, there's the merchandise revenue inside of that at that show, right? So you got the performance revenue, and my whole thing is I always want to see an artist build in markets where they can at least work out a door deal where they're getting at least anywhere between 80 to 100% of the door, right? So they're going to maximize that revenue because they can drive it. They're going to take more risk, but if we're doing our job on the marketing, we're going to be able to drive those people, and they're going to make more money that way, right? And
Mhm.
that's what I like to do. So I've always cut out and I'm always trying to see if we can cut out a promoter, if we can ultimately become our own promoter, because that's another problem in the industry. A lot of these
Yeah.
promoters are just setting the shows up and actually not driving people there, right? So that's one of the things. Obviously, selling merchandise, selling VIP access, pre-show for sound checks, all that, creating those systems in place for that as well, and then making sure that there's an experience for that fan where they can connect. And those are
Mhm.
that's where you're going to see additional merch sales as well. So that becomes like its own revenue stream with multiple revenue streams inside of it, right? So you
Mhm.
have the live performance with 3 revenue streams there, and then ultimately, there is the way of maybe potentially packaging that on like a live stream access for fans that can't make it to that show. So there's always that ability to do that, and we've done that in the past with certain bands that it makes sense for, and so we've seen revenue from that as well. So that's another add-on that you could do inside of that. And then ultimately, then there's the streaming revenue, right? So the streaming revenue and the revenue from your actual music across the board, that takes time to build, because you need
Yeah.
to, that's it's not like back in the day where you would sell that CD and you would make the $10 and that could go towards cash flow, right? You actually,
Mhm.
in order to generate that same $10, it takes time to build that streaming fan base, and ultimately you can make more money over time than you could on that initial sale of CD.
Mhm.
So you will, if you continue to grow and continue to market and build your fan base. But ultimately that takes time to build. Like, there's an artist we're working with right now called Anaria. We've been with them for about 2 years, and now they're basically breaking over $1,000 a month on royalties, right,
Yep.
from streaming, which is nice, right? So they have that, and then obviously we have sound exchange money from online radio station play, and then ultimately, so that's like its own world as well. And then there's some potential licensing deals out there where we'll collect some mechanical royalties as well, and publishing. So there's that side of the revenue stream, and then ultimately the other one is online, merchandise sales. So that's one of the things we build out, is we ensure that there's a revenue stream there on a funnel basis, where we have initial offer with upsells, and as we're driving people into this, we're making them feel special by saying, hey, you can only get this offer through this funnel from
Yeah.
coming in and becoming part of our fan club. And we're seeing great success from that, from a cold audience. Someone that's never heard of that band within 2 days is buying a product. It blows my mind that it actually worked.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, let's try this, because every other industry does it. I was like, let's just do it. And we tried it, and everybody was like, holy shit, this works. Let's keep pressing this. So then we ran it, and we built it as a templated thing for every single one of our artists. And every single one of our artists is selling merchandise now. And they're doing it on an online system from that initial funnel from the advertising on Facebook and Instagram. We're driving them in. Day 2, they get the exclusive offer. Once they go to checkout, they get a secondary offer. And then once they check out again from there, they get a third offer. And we're seeing that, basically for every 100 people we get into that funnel, every 100 fans, we see anywhere from like 7 to 15 sales on the initial product, and then we see a 50% to a 30% conversion rate on item 2 and 3, and we're like, whoa, this is working.
So even if you were, let's go down the middle between 7 and 15, let's say 10, right? If those numbers at 10 work really well, because a 10% conversion rate, anybody who's listening that thinks they're like 1% open rate and conversion rate is great, it's not. 10% is pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty.
Yeah.
It's mind blowing. I was actually
Yeah.
blown away that this was working. And then, so the other
Because
thing too is,
the dollar value is like pretty, like it is pretty decent for a first purchase, right? If you're buying, let's say, a T-shirt or a poster, you're talking 25 or $30. It's not an inconsequential amount of money to spend right away.
well, the way we're doing this, we're just trying to get somebody that's never heard of them and to become a buyer, so that we know that we've identified someone that will purchase,
Mhm.
and we get them to purchase later on, or we can get them to purchase right there in that funnel on the upsells, right? So the first initial offer really only will net that artist anywhere from like $2 to $3, because it's a low lift product, where it's like basically a fan pack, a signed photo, some guitar picks, a sticker, a magnet, right? And it creates this like, hey, you're part of the fan club, just purchase this, for the shipping and handling. And on that shipping and handling, there's the $2 processing fee, and that's what they end up netting, right? But we've
Mhm.
identified a buyer, right? So
Yeah.
somebody there, we go, okay, and now, 50% of those people, so, 10 of those, so 5 of those will buy the second product, which is the t-shirt. And then, basically 25 to 30% of those people will then buy the upsell, which is maybe a hat or a hoodie or something else. So we're seeing that. But then now we know that that person's a buyer, and we can get them to buy on the next offer, say
Yeah.
for the fall line or the
Yep.
winter line or the summer line, because that's my other thing too, is I want to make sure that the other biggest problem with artists that are, not making revenue is they're just not giving enough offers, right? They're not
Yep.
giving options to their fans. They're not saying, hey, we have a line for each season. Hey, we have a line for each release, right? We have a design
Mhm.
and a t-shirt for each one of these songs that we're putting on our albums. And that's the other thing. It's like, if you offer it, they will buy it.
Yeah. Well, you don't have to make a killing on each product, right? It's like, because one of the things, so I agree with you across the board on all this stuff. So it's like, and this is kind of like how I, either exactly how I teach it or close to how I teach it. So it's 100%, Dave approved if the people who listen to this. Not enough offers. And I think one of the things that people, they think it's just make it once, but no, it's like you can do all these special runs, right? Like limited quantities works
Yes.
really well.
Great.
Limited release things work very well. It's you're creating an idea of scarcity, and going back to the point about the funnel and getting 15 people to buy that, fan pack. Previous behavior indicates the likelihood of future behavior. I tell people, like, you can't make all your decisions based on data, but if you see somebody buy something, it's more likely they're going to buy in the future. So it gives you the opportunity to go, like, if I roll this out, it's not unlikely that somebody's going to buy it because I know I've got 500 people that bought from me before. And that's,
Yes.
and this is like a really smart way for people to approach this, because again, it's not just a music industry thing. These are ideas that work everywhere. This is like what Apple does to you. This is
E-commerce
what,
101 now.
yeah,
Yeah. It's
right.
like
Amazon. This,
retail 101. So, and I've always worked in retail, prior to like when I stopped. Actually, when I was younger, I worked for Best Buy and AT&T, and then I started full-time touring and I left, right? But I was always like the number one sales guy on both of those teams that I worked, because I understood sales, I understood people, I understood the process. And so like, I think that's allowed me to kind of take some of these strategies into what I do now, and realizing like, wow, the music industry isn't utilizing these, or at least on an independent level. But it's also funny because on a major label level, I'll sit in on marketing basically
yeah,
meetings and just be a fly on the wall sometimes, right? And then they ask my opinion at the end of it. And ultimately, none of them are thinking like this. They're just trying to make big viral moments right now. They're trying to spend money on a big explosion. They don't have any consistency or momentum based marketing that's underlying to ensure that there's growth all the time, you know?
absolutely. I tell everybody I learned all of these tricks in nightclubs, because the thing was, it's like nightclubs in South Florida where I grew up was very competitive. And like, so you had to, like, if you got somebody there, you had to figure out how to bring them back. We were talking about, like, how do we raise the check average by a quarter? I was really, really good at that. And this is the same thing that goes on in like retail. It's not a dirty thing. It's like, it's just using what works and
Of
like not
course.
being afraid of it. It's mind blowing a lot of times that people are, they're reluctant to it. And I think artists, they aren't exposed to it, which is, I'm grateful that you do this, because it's, again, this is the difference between making a living or holding down 3 or 4 jobs and maybe only being able to do the occasional gig in your town.
And then
Um,
eventually quitting, which is the most
yeah,
unfortunate thing I've ever seen, you
yeah, because
know?
there's so many people that like are great artists, great
Great.
musicians, and
Yeah.
they can't make it sustainable. So that's a big issue. So let me ask you this, because I had a note here. Oh, I don't want to move. So we touched on artists developing themselves. We talked about building fan bases. We've kind of hit on the music industry, the things you're doing. You're going on tour. You got a lot going on, Mark. It's great.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Um,
it's not.
yeah. but before I let you go, I want to ask you, like, if people are listening to this, and they were like, what are 1 or 2 things I can do to begin with, to like set myself up for success? What would you suggest? Like 1 to 3, because I know, like, I don't want to give them too much,
Yeah.
because I know they won't be able to take action on it. It'll just become overwhelming. Like, really, like 1 or 2 things is more than enough to get people to move down the right path.
Yeah, and I think the first thing is make an assessment of what success means to you, right? What does that
Yeah.
mean? And then put a number behind what that number is in order for you to be full time at your career, right? As a musician, right? What is the number that you need to make a month that will make you comfortable enough to say, I don't need to work anymore, right? So like that's
Hmm.
like step one. Write it down, right? Like it's funny. I hit one of my goals goals, like all of my goals for the year, I just looked at the piece of paper and I wrote them all down, and I've already hit them. And I'm like blown away. I'm like, oh my! I called my business partner. I'm like, I already hit these goals. He's like, oh, well, better write another one. But it's when you put pen to paper, it works, right? He's like, you better go
Yeah,
write another one. And I was like, all right.
absolutely.
And it was amazing. It was like I had a huge epiphany yesterday. I was like, wow, I really did this. It worked, and I'm going to continue to do it. And I've done it over the years. But I'm like really focusing on it. I tell all my artists, write it down. Let's put it down on paper.
Mhm.
We set it up. We put like basically a rock sheet together on a Google spreadsheet that we
Yep.
could all share and look at, and then we go after those goals. But ultimately, that's step one. And then step two, it's like you need to create connection with your fans, right? And so one of the things that's easy to do right now, I would tell all any artist that's listening, is go into your Instagram right now, and I want you to start messaging, DMing every single one of your followers one at a time, and start saying, "Hey, thanks so much for following me on here. What did you think of my latest release? I'm looking for feedback." Right? Open up a conversation with them
Yeah.
about the release, and open up a conversation with them and speak to them. Right? When I first started, we used MySpace, and our DMs were nonstop, and we used that to build these
Mhm.
relationships with. And we went from 50 people in our backyard to 1,200 just by doing this over and over and over
Yeah.
again and creating these relationships. Open up that conversation. And then while you're in that conversation, be like, hey, by the way, you mind if I add you to, into my fan list where I can potentially get you some emails and text messages down the road when I start it, right? Even if you don't have it yet, have the system built it, start building that directory, right? Get their name, their phone
Mhm.
number, their email, get their location so you know where the demand is for the show. And then, the other piece that I like to have is where do they stream? Ask them where they stream.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, this is like easy stuff. I mean, again, if we use me as an example, about 2 times a year, I go through the entire list, thousands of people, and I email everybody, like personally, 1 or 2 times a year. I'm like going, "Hey, this is me," not just like, "What's up?" And it's like as simple as like going, "Tell me what's going on with you." Like, how are
Yeah.
how are things going? And people are like amazed that they get the email from me, but I was like going, you know the newsletters that go out, they have like a over 50% open rate, right? And like
Yeah.
when I sold out a workshop in Melbourne, Australia, right? Never been there before, all from the power of like doing stuff like this, and
Connecting with
it's
people on
replicable.
a
You can
real,
replicate it.
it's like
Yeah.
hand-to-hand combat is what I tell everybody. Like the first 1,000 is like you got to be in there, and you got to make those connections and be personal with these people because now they're going to be invested into what you're doing because they feel like you care. You know?
Right. Well, they're invested because they feel like you care, but then they also feel like they know you. It's like that.
Yes,
It's that parasocial relationship they talk about. That thing is real because
it
people
is.
feel like I talk about my son and my wife and freaking Penny the bulldog who's going nuts behind me.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
like people feel like they know you. It's like, but it's not a weakness. It's not like people being intrusive. It's that they connect with you, and I think that's like the thing that I dig about what you're doing is like you're teaching people like going, it's about relationship, and the relationships they don't just happen. They take work. You have to nurture them, and like just assuming that like a follower or a listener is a relationship, don't do that. Like
Yes.
go deeper, especially when you're the first 1,000, 2,000 people, but they'll make all the difference in the world.
Big time.
Yeah.
100%.
So, Mark, where do people find you on the internet?
So you can, find me on Instagram, Mark_Bamo. Ultimately, Make Our Music is really the hub of everything that's going on. MakeOurMusic.com will kind of point you in all the directions. We have our book available there, Indie Artist Compass, which basically outlines everything that I'm explaining in regards to start to finish of how you
Mhm.
should start, basically putting your music out there and building that fan base and these relationships. And then ultimately inside of Make Our Music, we have DistroFlowy now, which is our distribution platform. So, I was kind of getting sick of the DistroKid and TuneCore and CD Babies and their customer service
Yeah.
level. So we created our own, right? So ultimately we have our own distribution platform now for independent artists. And then now obviously FanFlowy is the foundational tool that we use for all of our artists.
Well, Mark, man, good luck with your tour. Good luck with Make Our Music. Thanks so much for doing this, man.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Let me know what you thought about my conversation with Mark by sending me an email. It is my name, Dave@DaveWakeman.com. I really want to point you towards Mark's website. It's red13creative.com for people who are new to the industry, who are touring musicians, who are trying to build an audience. I really want you to pay attention to what Mark's doing, because I can't highlight how powerful these ideas are. And it's great that the foundations of what Mark is talking about are really built on that kind of real marketing thing that I've talked about over the years. So check Mark's website out. Make sure you check out my website as well. It's davewakeman.com. Get the Talking Tickets newsletter at talkingtickets.substack.com. We have a Slack channel. I will put the link in the show notes. Keep an eye out for the Fans for Life workshop, reinvented, reimagined even. There has been a lot of stuff on the website and on Talking Tickets. Premium seating, the Met Opera, a lot of Live Nation. For my liking, too much of the Live Nation trial, but it's the kind of, for lack of a better term, the gift that keeps on giving. There's just been so much interesting testimony and evidence that's presented that I think it kind of goes to that core thesis I have of, like, you got to find ways to maintain control of your business. You have to make decisions that are going to be best for you and not just go along with the crowd. It's something I'm tired of. The case itself, I'm tired of hearing about and talking about, but I think it provides so many opportunities for learning. So check out the Talking Tickets newsletter. Do me a favor, share the podcast with someone that you know who will benefit from a conversation like this would with Mark. Rate it and review it on your favorite podcast platforms. It helps make sure that people find that conversation, that I can continue to have them. And as always, I want to thank you so much for being here, and I will talk to you again soon. Take it easy.